I love Scooby-Doo wholeheartedly. I truly don't think I've ever watched Scooby-Doo media that I didn't enjoy. I didn't watch the bad ones, I'll be honest, but all the other ones are great. I truly do believe that Scooby-Doo is one of the greatest franchises ever created, and it doesn't get enough credit for it. Hello everyone, it's Dakota. Today I'm talking about Scooby-Doo because it's my channel and I do what I want. And I love Scooby-Doo. Also, Formula 1 hasn't been on and I'm still pissy about Daniel Ricciardo, so I have to make a video about something that makes me happy for once. So let's start in the beginning. In 1969, when Hanna-Barbera premiered their new show, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? On CBS's Saturday morning cartoons. It centered around 4 meddling kids and their dog, too, as they went around solving mysteries and finding culprits behind monsters who were terrorizing certain places. The main characters included Fred Jones, who was basically the leader, Daphne Blake, who was the popular one, and Velma Dinkley, who was the smart and informed one. Then of course we have the namesake of the show, Scooby-Doo, and his best friend Shaggy Rogers, who although they were terrified of all the monsters, inevitably were the ones to catch the guy behind the mask. Scooby-Doo moved to ABC in 1976, and different variations of the show have been relevant in pop culture ever since. But think about it, that original show was made in 1969 and they're still making content for it today. That's 55 years! Even though there's been different media, the characters and the plot lines are always roughly the same, and the only other series comparable to this is Star Trek. Even wildly popular series like Star Wars and Harry Potter have had trouble with continued success after the original series. It's obviously a little bit different because shows like Scooby-Doo and Star Trek have a lot of different characters and you can kind of place them into any situation, whereas Star Wars and Harry Potter and all these other big franchises had one main focused story that is kind of hard to deviate from. Also, Scooby-Doo is for children, so that's another layer that makes it a little bit easier if everything doesn't quite fit perfectly. Even though it was a bit predictable, the tried and true formula of Scooby-Doo was always successful and able to be changed and differentiated enough so that each story was still interesting. They used things like Scooby Snacks and the running and hiding in plain sight over and over again, and it always pleases the fans because it's classic. And don't even bring Marvel movies into this conversation because Marvel and Scooby-Doo are nowhere near the same thing. Marvel capitalized off popularity and pumping out as much content as possible in a short amount of time, whereas Scooby-Doo periodically releases different media and it's always successful. Definitely not as successful, but still relevant nonetheless. But listen to this. On Rotten Tomatoes, the Scooby-Doo live action has a 33%. The Marvels has a 62%. Sorry you don't know what real cinema is, I feel bad for you. It was also ironically written by James Gunn, who wrote the Guardians of the Galaxy series. And Scooby-Doo does rely a lot on nostalgia and being familiar with other content, but even if you just watch a standalone movie or episode, everything's still gonna make sense. Compare that to Marvel, where a lot of times if you don't watch all the content, you seem to be missing stuff. But let's talk about the actual Scooby-Doo media. Similar TV shows starring the gang ran from 1969 through 1978 before Fred, Velma, and Daphne were all replaced by Scrappy-Doo. And people hated him, like, a lot. And supposedly, that's why he was the villain in the live-action Scooby-Doo movie. Of course Scrappy was annoying. You're taking 3 completely different characters and trying to mash them into one. He was just kind of a character destined to fail. Scrappy lasted through the 80s and early 90s when Scooby-Doo released their first few movies, including Scooby-Doo Meets the Boo Brothers in 1987, Scooby-Doo in the Ghoul School and Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf in 1988, and Scooby-Doo in Arabian Nights in 1994. I had every single one of those movies on VHS, and if you're young enough watching this, you might not even know what a VHS tape is. But also in 1988, a show A Pup Named Scooby-Doo aired and showcased Scooby and the gang as children. And people loved it because they loved the original gang with Fred, Velma, and Daphne, so when they made new Scooby-Doo content after that, they included these characters once again. And then, in 1988, God gifted us with the masterpiece that is Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. I do genuinely think it's one of my favorite animated movies ever. The story is just so engaging and every little detail is so important. It's just not appreciated enough. There's a scene in the movie where Shaggy and Scooby are like out in the woods and they fall into this big pit that somebody dug, and the zombie pirate starts to like piece himself together, and I was so scared of it when I was little. I would hide behind the couch and cover my ears because I didn't like the sound that was playing from the TV, and then I would make my sister come get me when it was over. I was like 6, so... But Zombie Island and the few movies released after it are some of the best Scooby-Doo content ever made. Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost, Alien Invaders, The Cyber Chase, and The Legend of the Vampire were all fantastic, and I watched every movie released, probably up until around 2012. I think Music of the Vampire was the last direct-to-video I saw, but they did make a movie with Kiss, which is pretty impressive, and I feel like I have to watch it now. Then of course there was the 2 live actions, which I genuinely think were good films, and I don't understand why they have such low ratings. Did people go to these movies expecting them to be the new Dead Poets Society, or do they just hate fun? I even think that the casting was really good. To have Buffy the Vampire Slayer play Daphne, and Matthew Lillard is still voicing Shaggy to this day. I love Matthew Lillard. I want to be like his neighbor, and like when he goes on vacation, he asks me to water his plants because I'm his favorite neighbor. Also in 2002, What's New Scooby-Doo was released with a banger theme song by Simple Plan that I unironically listen to probably too often. What's New Scooby-Doo is probably my favorite of the Scooby-Doo TV shows because it stayed true to the classic characters and storylines, but it also made it modern and engaging as well. Then Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated was decent, but I honestly don't remember watching it that much because that was right around when I started school. Kindergarten. Do you feel old? But it is on Netflix though, so I probably will rewatch it. And if you haven't heard, Netflix also has a plan to create a new live-action Scooby-Doo series. Do I think it's gonna be good? No. It's probably gonna be some dark teenage angst reboot that a ton of people watch but no one really enjoys that much. Or they could surprise me and actually put a lot of care into a show for once, but I wouldn't hold my breath. But there's actually another Scooby-Doo inspired show that's supposed to be coming out in the next coming years called Go Go Mystery Machine. And I'm not an anime person, it's just not for me, but I am intrigued. It seems interesting, and I honestly really do want to check it out. Also, Matthew Lillard's still in it, so how bad could it possibly be? But let me go back for a second to Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost. Even if you never watched the movie, you might recognize the popular side characters, the Hex Girls. And I feel in my bones that a Hex Girls movie is coming, and I beg you, let me write it. There are already ideas floating around in my head, and this movie needs to be made by someone who really cares about the source material. I have no money, no connections, and maybe I'm just blowing smoke up my own ass, but I really think that no one else could make this movie better than I could. I know that if some money-hungry Disney executive gets his hands on this idea, the movie's gonna suck. And if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. My movie would be about parasocial relationships with celebrities, music labels controlling their artists, and I would get a mystery in there somewhere. I don't know what it is, but I will get it in there somewhere. And I would get the original Monster High designers to run the costume department. If Disney makes the film, they'll make it some weird girl boss movie with no real characters and no real plotline just so they can sell dolls. That's pretty much all I got, you know. When it comes to recently released Scooby-Doo content, Scoob was cute, yeah, it was alright, it's never gonna be a classic. And then there's the other show that I won't even mention the name because it's based on Scooby-Doo, but it doesn't have Scooby-Doo in it. And seeing clips of it online makes me want to fight the creators. Sorry, but that's what I mean about like a Hex Girls movie. It's obvious that the person that created this show didn't care about the source material. They just wanted to make a show about them using this character. I'm not about to do that. Anyway, that's it for today, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, have a great rest of your day.